interesting. We produce a fast fanzine in a couple of days, and then we show it. And great, a good experience. Also nice people. So I was really happy to work with them.
Yeah, nice.
Right.
And is COVID sort of slowing down there? Is it all calming down?
Yeah.
Of course, COVID calms down, and then we have other shit to worry about.
Yeah. Really.
Amazing times. Amazing times.
Yeah, amazing. You know, after the pandemic, just a war. So what's next? You know.
I know. I've been doing a project recently where I asked people their thoughts about the future, and there's a long list of worries, a long list of things to worry about.
How is the situation in Great Britain?
With Britain?
Yeah, with Great Britain in the country.
Well, you know, we are of course, everything is fucking marvelous in Britain.
Venturino, che abbiamo a Piero, buonasera a tutti. Guarda chi c'è, guarda, per la prima volta abbiamo a Piero, Massimo.
No, davvero?
Sì, guardalo.
Aspetta,
non si vede, ma è in Germania.
Ciao a tutti.
Ciao Piero, ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao a tutti, ciao Santo. Ciao Aldo, ciao Arnaldo. E benvenuti, qualche minuto e ci siamo.
Buonasera a tutti. Ciao
Buonasera.
Franco. Ciao Massimo, buonasera.
Ciao.
Papà.
Massimo, quando volete potete iniziare. Che dici, Marti?
Sì, siamo in streaming su Facebook, sto accettando qualcun altro, però quando volete, insomma.
E allora pazientiamo ancora qualche minuto.
Just a few minutes more, please, Julian.
I'm just coming, if you wait for me.
Ok, io direi che possiamo andare se vuoi. Fai tu gli onori di casa, Massimo.
Sì. Ok, benvenuti a tutti. Julian è un amico, ha già lavorato con noi di DOR, ma è anche assoluto un autore estremamente interessante, che coniuga secondo me perfettamente quello che può essere anche un vecchio linguaggio con la metafora e soprattutto con l'interesse vero verso le persone di qualunque tipo. Quindi vedremo progetti condivisi con varie generazioni e questo secondo me è un valore davvero aggiunto rispetto ad altri autori. Hi Julian, thanks for being here.
Pleasure.
Okay, you are. Okay, so as I told you, I will put you some questions. First of all, I will put the question in Italian, and then Martina will translate for you.
Okay.
So the first question is about Steelworks. Julian, come è nato il tuo interesse per Consett e i suoi abitanti? E come si è sviluppato il tuo lavoro nel corso del tempo? Allora faccio una piccolissima premessa. Steelworks è un libro che lui ha realizzato diversi anni fa, ormai parecchi anni fa, intorno a una cittadina che praticamente aveva uno dei più grandi parchi industriali, acciaieria, un'acciaieria enorme, un po' come la situazione in Taranto, però diciamo la cittadina molto più piccola. Grazie alla Thatcher questa situazione è fallita clamorosamente, nel senso che le persone che avevano avevano da vivere, avevano un'identità, si identificavano anche con un luogo e nel corso del tempo varie generazioni si erano impegnate nel lavorare in questo ambiente. Ovviamente a causa della crisi economica la Thatcher ha pensato bene, come in tante altre parti dell'Inghilterra, di cancellare questa città e questa realtà, e quindi è stata una delle più grandi opere di smantellamento industriale e i cittadini si sono trovati improvvisamente spodestati di tutta una serie di certezze. Julian ha lavorato su questa realtà realizzando lui delle immagini, raccogliendo immagini d'archivio, soprattutto di un fotografo che lavorava per un giornale locale. E ne è venuto fuori un libro che è stato anche menzionato nella photobook History volume credo 1 o 2 di Martin Parr e Jerry Badger. Ok, Marti, scusa la premessa, fai direttamente la domanda, Julian, se puoi.
Sì. So Julian, Massimo's question is how did your interest in Consett and its inhabitants start? How has your work developed over time?
Well, I mean, how did the project start? I was a photography student, and my interests were in social subjects. And a friend of mine from college came from Consett, which is a town in the northeast of England. And he said to me, I was studying there for 3 years, and he was telling me for 2.5 years that I should go to Consett because he thought I would be interested in the place. And then I visited after I finished. So I finished my degree in photography, and I had a small commission. And as part of that commission, I visited Consett for 2 or 3 days, and then there was a kind of gap of a year, and then I went back to study a master's, and I went back to Consett. And when I went back the second time, I started to photograph in color. In fact, one of the reasons why I went to do a master's was because after I finished my degree, my bachelor degree, it became difficult to find a darkroom and to make work, and I had made some color projects when I was doing my bachelor degree, but at this point I wanted to work in color, and so I went to do a master's at the Royal College of Art, which is in London, and then I found myself traveling from London up to Consett from around, I would say, I first visited Consett in 1984. I made a few black and white pieces. I went back, I would say, in 1986, the spring of 1986. And I was working there until the book was published in 1990.
Can you stop a little bit just to make a transition of the first time?
Allora, diciamo che lui insomma ha cominciato da studente di fotografia e aveva un grande interesse per le dinamiche sociali. Già al tempo un amico del college che veniva da Conza gli aveva detto di andare lì e vedere il posto perché sapeva che sarebbe stato di suo interesse, e quindi Julian c'è andato la prima volta nel 1984 per qualche giorno e poi ci è ritornato una seconda volta nel 1986, diciamo durante il suo periodo del master al Royal College of Art di Londra, dove già stava cominciando a fare qualche progetto a colori.
Ok, go on.
In a way, the book isn't put together in the same chronology that the project happened, if you understand. I mean, I didn't begin the project with the book in mind, but I must say that the way I organized this presentation, I just organized it around the book. And so you see a different kind of chronology here. But initially, I wonder whether it might be easier if I switch to a different presentation, because
Okay.
Let me just...
Intanto stava dicendo che il progetto non è cominciato con ovviamente in mente il libro, la disposizione era differente, comunque adesso vi mostra un qualcosa di più rappresentativo.
So if I just say that the first time I visited Concert, the style of photographs I was making is something like this.
Queste fotografie che vi fa vedere adesso sono relative, diciamo, al primo periodo in cui ha visitato Concept, così potete anche capire come si è evoluto il progetto.
Okay, and then when I started making pictures there again a couple of years later, I was initially doing something a little bit different. I was photographing the landscape, and I was trying to photograph something that wasn't there anymore, because steelworks closed down. The steelworks there closed down in 1980, September 1980. I visited there initially in 1984, but then by the time 1986 had arrived, this was kind of what was left of the steelworks.
Allora, come potete vedere insomma, da questa immagine a colori, relativa alla seconda volta in cui è tornato, stava comunque cercando di fare qualcosa di differente e cercava di fotografare più che altro il paesaggio, e un paesaggio che in qualche modo mostrava qualcosa che non c'era più, perché le steelworks, non so come si può dire, le acciaierie non erano state smantellate nel 1980 già, e la seconda volta che lui è tornato lì era già il 1986.
And let me just escape again. And so yes, I was exploring the space and looking for ways to try to communicate the scale of the change that had taken place in Concert.
E, insomma, esplorava lo spazio e cercava in qualche modo di trovare la chiave per comunicare la scala di cambiamento che stava avendo luogo a Concert.
So, for example, I made pictures like this. Oh, is that going to work? Yeah. And I was playing with text, and so the text with this, which ironically I can't read on my screen because it's so busy, but it says, 283 hectares, which is the equivalent of 423 football pitches landscaped. And so I was trying to use very, very minimal text to imply the enormity of the scale of something that doesn't exist anymore, if you know what I mean. And so here is a football pitch. Just imagine 423 of them, and you get some idea of how big the steelworks was.
Insomma, per darvi un'idea del modo in cui stava lavorando, scorre insomma attraverso queste foto che vedete ora, nelle quali giocava con il testo in maniera molto minimale, però per dare l'idea appunto del grande cambiamento che stava avendo luogo lì. Nella prima immagine che avete visto c'era scritto 423, mi pare, ettari di terreno, e tra parentesi l'equivalente di tantissimi campi di calcio, quindi proprio per dare idea di quanto fossero grandi quelle acciaierie.
Or for example, this I mean, they're almost like titles, but I built the titles actually into the visual of the work. The title wasn't on the wall next to the picture. The title was actually within the frame, if you know what I mean. And so this simply says Consett bus station built with Italian steel. And that was a very contentious fact for the people of the town. They thought it was, for them, so ironic that they had a new bus station, but the steel had come from another country, where they were famous for making the steel that built the Sydney Harbour Bridge. And you could see Consett steel all over the world, and no, it was no more.
Questa immagine qui in particolare, ecco, come potete vedere il testo lui lo inseriva proprio all'interno della cornice dell'immagine, e anche qui per esempio c'è scritto stazione dell'autobus di Consett fatta con acciaio italiano, molto ironico anche per gli stessi abitanti di Consett, che erano, insomma, Consett è diventata famosa per le sue acciaierie che avevano fabbricato il porto di Sydney, e adesso la loro nuova stazione dell'autobus veniva fabbricata con acciaio italiano.
So for example, what you can see through this window is somebody's front garden, and then behind their front garden is, you can see a fence, and then you can see this sort of landscape in the semi-distance, and that used to be where the steelworks was. And so there was this perimeter fence around the steelworks site that was well, I was told it was 8 miles long. When I actually measured it, it was 5 miles, but in people's minds they'd blown it up to being 8 miles, so I used that in the text. And so, I mean, so I regularly did the walk all the way around the steelworks site to make pictures. And so there's a number of pictures which fit into this 8 miles of perimeter fence little series.
Le sue immagini, insomma, erano scattate lungo il perimetro di questa ringhiera che si costruita proprio attorno al perimetro delle acciaierie, e in questa immagine qui in particolare ci sono diversi livelli di lettura. Infatti la prima cosa che si vede è il giardino frontale, come si dice, della casa di qualcuno, e poi si intravede questa ringhiera che, quando Julian l'ha effettivamente misurata, erano 5 miglia, ma insomma si diceva, a lui era stato detto che erano 8 miglia, e comunque ha usato quelle 8 miglia perché facevano parte dell'immaginario effettivo delle persone quando pensavano insomma, al perimetro dell'acciaieria. E quindi le immagini di Julian venivano, cioè lui le scattava regolarmente percorrendo il perimetro di questo luogo.
So actually, if you look at the section in the book, which because the first phase of I suppose the the first phase of my second visit to Consett, there was a piece of work of image text work, which was made between 1986 and 1987, and this is that section of the book.
Questa sezione che state vedendo adesso, appunto, sì, è la prima fase della seconda tappa a Consett, durante la quale lui stava appunto lavorando su teste e immagini, tutte insomma scattate nel periodo che va dal 1986 all'87.
And so this is basically my master's degree exhibition.
Questa è fondamentalmente la sua mostra di laurea, come dire, magistrale, il master's degree, la laurea magistrale in fotografia.
So that's that. So that was where I got to when I finished my master's degree, and then after I graduated, I just went back and carried on working. By then, I'd made a lot of connections, good friends, and I also had discovered a guy called Tommy Harris. Let me just well, let me see if I can find, where's he? Yeah, I met this guy here in that blurred photograph on the right hand side, a guy called Martin Heron. He was unemployed, a young guy. He's just a couple of years older than me. He was unemployed, very interested in photography, very intelligent, an ambitious writer, and he was also a very good photographer, and he was a member of a community group, unemployed people, and one day he called me up and told me to go to the darkrooms, the community darkrooms in Consett, and to see this box of negatives, because there was a gentleman called Tommy Harris. Here he is. There was this guy called Tommy Harris who had gone into the community darkroom and left 2 cardboard boxes of negatives. And this guy's work kind of changed the direction of many of my projects ever since, because the story about Tommy Harris was that he was a steel worker, but he worked part-time as a photographer for the local newspaper, and he was a very interesting chap. I've got here a bit of text from the book, from an interview I did with him. Where are you, Tommy?
I'll translate that if you
don't.
Yeah,
go for it while I find it.
Right. Diciamo che poi dopo la laurea ha semplicemente continuato il progetto, aveva già molte amicizie e molti contatti, e quindi quando è tornato insomma, è capitato un episodio molto particolare. Una persona che conosceva che ha chiamato Julian per fargli vedere che erano stati ritrovate 2 scatole di negativi nella camera oscura, insomma, locale e collettiva, e questo evento ha proprio cambiato la direzione del lavoro di Julian, ma anche di tutti i lavori successivi. Insomma, queste 2 scatole di negativi erano state lasciate da un certo Tommy Harris, che era praticamente un operaio dell'acciaieria, ma lavorava anche part-time come fotografo nel giornale locale. E adesso vi fa vedere.
Yeah, he was a fantastic raconteur. He could tell great stories, Tommy. He's obviously dead now. But essentially, as he says here, I started for the local press in 1949. It may seem funny, but you couldn't get photographers then. I wanted to be a reporter, but they needed photographers. Today, they're lying around like confetti, which I think is a beautiful quote. Do you know what confetti is?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we use the same word, yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, he makes the point that there weren't many photographers around then, because he basically had been fighting in the war, and he stayed on to help the partisans in Yugoslavia after the war was officially finished, and he didn't get back to Britain until the late 1940s, and he started at the steelworks, and he started taking pictures for the local newspaper.
Insomma, Julian ha introdotto qui con questo testo scritto proprio da Harris un po' la storia di questo personaggio molto particolare che raccontava delle storie insomma molto interessanti locali. Una frase che aveva colpito Julian era stata proprio questa di Harris, che diceva che volevo essere un reporter ma loro cercavano un fotografo, al tempo non si riuscivano a trovare i fotografi, al contrario di adesso che ce ne sono a bizzeffe, insomma.
And the kind of photographs he typically took were like this. I mean, this is a school pop band from the English Martyrs Secondary School. It's a Catholic school, and slightly. I mean, and the pictures kind of show a kind of naivety and a kind of innocence, and I think also a kind of optimism. I mean, Consett was an out of the way place, not a cool place at all. But that was a period in British history where things were getting better. People's living standards were going up. Unemployment was relatively very low. And I think Tommy's pictures and local newspaper photography, because nothing really happens. There isn't really hard news for most local for most of the time for a local newspaper to report on. So most of the news would be kind of, I mean, I call local newspaper photography, it's like they're like municipal family snapshots.
Insomma, questa è proprio l'esempio di un'immagine di quelle tipiche scattate da Harris, che essendo insomma un fotografo per il giornale locale non vi erano degli avvenimenti particolarmente eclatanti, però le immagini erano interessanti perché mostravano una certa innocenza e un certo ottimismo, perché in quel periodo le cose andavano relativamente bene per le persone, nel senso che la disoccupazione stava diminuendo di gran lunga, e insomma era un periodo piuttosto positivo, e in qualche modo emerge questa ingenuità dalle immagini e questa innocenza.
And so this was an exciting discovery, because when I discovered these, they were basically negatives and contact prints. And when I went to the local county records office, the sort of archives office, because both of the local newspaper had closed down. It closed down in around 1970, I think. So Tommy stopped being a newspaper photographer then, but obviously the county library had old copies. And when I went and hunted down Tommy's pictures, I found this. You know, so this is this to me is a fantastic picture. But this is how the picture was used.
Questa è interessante perché diciamo che lui aveva trovato i negativi e quindi solo negativi e qualche provino a contatto che è, insomma, quindi le immagini erano tutte da stampare. E anche l'altra cosa che aveva cominciato a fare Julian era risalire anche alle copie di questo giornale, all'archivio locale, alla biblioteca locale, perché insomma il giornale era stato chiuso intorno al 1970 e questa immagine di Prima in particolare con quella donna scattata da Harris per intero, era interessante vedere poi come venne pubblicata sul giornale ritagliata solo la figura della donna di Prima.
And this is another example. So this is another wonderful picture. This is a kind of beauty pageant. And this is a local politician kissing the beauty queen. But it's just a beautiful composition with it's lovely the way the saxophone is being blown at the same moment as the kiss is happening. And I like the girl on the left-hand side that you can't really see her face, and the guy on the right-hand side. You know what I mean? There's loads of things compositionally about the picture, and of course it's a charming image as well. But then you see how it's used in the paper, and it's used like. And when I discovered that really Tommy's work had never been seen, and when I talked to Tommy and discovered that he basically didn't really compose pictures in the way that most of us do, he just got his subject in the middle and then made two pictures in case in one of them somebody was blinking from the flash, you know. And Tommy openly admitted, in fact, in his text back here, he says at the bottom, yeah, the very last line, I've taken thousands of pictures. I can't think of any I would call outstanding. And I realized that for him, it was really useful extra money. And he loved the social aspect of it. You know, I mean, I walked through the town with Tommy and he couldn't walk 10 feet without somebody saying hello. And he'd say, oh, well, yes, I photographed him, and I photographed him when he's, you know, so he just knew everybody in the town. But he didn't consider himself a serious photographer. And
oh, sorry.
Carry on. No, you go.
Diciamo che stessa cosa per l'immagine che vi ho fatto vedere poi, questa qui, di una sfilata di moda locale, e poi la differenza di come insomma veniva scattata l'immagine, che presenta anche degli elementi molto interessanti secondo Julian, come la ragazza che non si vede sulla sinistra, il bacio di un politico locale alla vincitrice, e allo stesso tempo l'uomo che suona il sax lì dietro, degli elementi molto interessanti, che però poi quando vediamo come veniva effettivamente usata l'immagine, quel crop molto stretto, Julian si rende conto che effettivamente il lavoro di Harris non era stato visto in realtà, e d'altra parte era anche interessante parlare con Harris, che lui ha conosciuto, che faceva il fotografo, ma fondamentalmente per alzare un qualcosina in più a livello di soldi. Lo faceva per il suo aspetto sociale, perché entrava in contatto con tante persone che poi anche negli anni lo riconoscevano e lo salutavano, ma Harry stesso ammette e dice di pensare di non aver mai scattato una fotografia particolarmente degna di rilievo in qualche modo. Semplicemente il modo di scattare di Harris non era di comporre nel modo in cui lo intendiamo noi. il suo metodo di lavoro standard era posizionare il soggetto al centro, scattare 2 immagini per sicurezza, di modo che se una fosse venuta con il soggetto con gli occhi chiusi per il flash, l'altra no.
Yeah, so and so I just decided when I discovered Tommy, thanks to my friend Martin, that Tommy Harris's work need to become part of whatever it was I was trying to put together in about concert, because I thought it was so interesting to see in Tommy's pictures concert at a time of optimism and at a time of things, even though people were quite poor, they were getting better. And so people had this impression that things were getting better. And then of course, when I went there, it was a different story. So it was a strong contrast. And the other, you know, and his pictures are so entertaining. I mean, a picture like this, for example, you try to decode it to work out what's happening. And Tommy is trying to illustrate a story for the local newspaper. And so it's something to do with 2 nuns. And the magazine they're holding is the Concert Iron Company magazine. So it's interesting how you hardly ever see the steelworks in Tommy's archive, but it appears because the Iron Company, they built the library, they built the school, they built the hospital. The whole town is seeped with the steelworks. And then there's this, I think it's a jigsaw puzzle. Is that Ireland? I think it might be Ireland. So, there's some sort of story about nuns, steel, and Ireland, and a jigsaw puzzle that Tommy's illustrating for the paper, And so Tommy led me into also thinking about all the other kinds of photography that exist around a place like Concert. And so I started to collect family snapshots that people had shown me also. So if I go back to here, when I came to the book actually opens in terms of the photographs. The book actually opens with hang on, where's that? With snapshots. Now, this book was published in 1990, and so I could only have one section of color pictures. I could only afford to have one section of color pictures. And so, so everything in the book is printed duotone, including the snapshots, and the only bit of color in the book is my pictures, the actual photographs that I made. There was nothing I could do about that. It was just a financial decision. But nevertheless, the book opens photographically with family snapshots. So this is family snapshots part 1, you can see up there. But it also closes with family snapshots at the back. And the thinking behind that was that actually the oldest picture that appears in the book was from somebody's family album. And the last picture that was taken that appears in the book was also from somebody's family album. So I was interested in this idea that artists like Julian Germain come and go, editorial photojournalists like Don McCarlin come and go, local photographers like Tommy Harris come and go, but the people of Concert will always be making pictures and always have done. And interspersed with the snapshots were bits of quotes that people said to me, just interesting snippets of information that I read or that I heard from somewhere. But they were designed to sort of refer a little bit to to a family album.
Allora, riguardo all'immagine di prima che aveva fatto vedere delle due suore, era veramente curioso per lui il fatto di come le storie che cercava di narrare Harris adesso fossero in qualche modo degli enigmi per noi da decifrare, che però avevano sempre indirettamente a che fare con l'acciaieria. Infatti il magazine cioè la rivista che le suore tenevano in mano era quello del produttore di acciaio, e lui, Harris, non fotografa mai direttamente l'acciaieria, ma in qualche modo le immagini hanno sempre a che fare con essa. E la cosa interessante poi per Julian era il fatto che appunto al tempo in queste immagini si vedeva una certa ingenuità e ottimismo, che era poi in contrasto o in qualche modo era uno sviluppo diverso, una storia diversa rispetto al momento in cui poi Julian andava a scattare in questo luogo, e quindi era interessante far intrecciare questi momenti e queste visioni, e quindi aveva appunto deciso che le immagini di Harris dovevano far parte del lavoro. E poi queste che vediamo adesso e poco prima sono delle istantanee di famiglia che lui ha inserito all'inizio e alla fine del libro, e l'idea dietro a questo concetto è il fatto che artisti come Julian Germain, fotogiornalisti, fotoreporter locali, qualsiasi nome abbiamo dietro alla fotografia, questi vanno e vengono, mentre le immagini scattate dalle famiglie e dalle persone verranno sempre scattate. Quindi lui ha inserito queste, e accanto magari a frasi dette da queste persone, oppure informazioni e stralci di informazioni raccolte da lui stesso, che lo hanno particolarmente colpito. E un altro fatto, insomma, un'altra cosa legata al libro è che, essendo il libro pubblicato negli anni 90, è presente la maggior parte delle immagini pubblicate in bianco e nero, comprese le istantanee, e l'unica parte a colori, proprio per ragioni appunto economiche, sono le immagini scattate da Julian. È, insomma, una decisione di lavoro prettamente economica, insomma.
Julian, can you show us some of your pictures? I mean, the pictures of the book, because are very
Yes.
different from the picture you show at the beginning.
Yeah.
And in the meanwhile, I want to ask you another question, to put you another question. I'll put in Italian, then Martina will translate. Quali sono state, secondo te, le conseguenze a lungo termine di questa politica Consett e in generale nella Gran Bretagna, cioè dalla politica della Thatcher?
Massimo asking what you think are the long-term consequences of the Thatcher politics on the people.
Of the what politics?
Of the Thatcher politics.
Margaret Thatcher politics.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting question, because I have been back to Consett recently, and it's changed beyond recognition. I mean, in some ways, there's no doubt that it's changed for the better, because it was filthy, dirty, dangerous work. But on the other hand, it kind of generated a kind of community that doesn't really exist anymore. Now the population is much more mobile, and yes, we live in a economy which is just radically altered. We have very little heavy industry anymore, and those communities that were built around heavy industries have pretty much disappeared. And so we live in a society which is more disjointed. I think atomized is a term that is sometimes used. People, we have more people living on their own than ever before. People live further away from their families. even though we're more connected than ever before by telephones and mobile, I mean, bear in mind, I didn't even have a fucking mobile phone when this was going on. You know, this is so long ago that the change is extraordinary and enormous. And so, yes, I mean, I think most people agree, I think, or that people on the say the moderate left can see that in a global capitalist economy, there was no room for a concept to exist. And so a correct path would have been a transformation that was less sudden, because here you had a situation where a steelworks closed overnight, and there was kind of nothing, and the impact of that on communities, especially in the north of Britain, but not exclusively in the north of Britain, was enormous and continues to be felt now, even 40 years later.
Diciamo che praticamente Consett è cambiata enormemente, e se la vediamo adesso chiaramente vediamo che è cambiata in meglio, perché prima era estremamente povera. Ha generato comunque una comunità che adesso non esiste più, perché ora la popolazione è sicuramente più mobile. Il fatto che adesso c'è poca industria pesante, e le comunità che un tempo si erano costruite e formate attorno proprio all'industria pesante ora si sono dissolte. Abbiamo una società che è senz'altro più atomizzata, più sparsa, le persone sono molto più lontane e vivono molto più lontane dalle loro famiglie. E chiaramente la globalizzazione, l'economia globalizzata e capitalista non dà modo a una concept di un tempo di esistere. Diciamo che in qualche modo sarebbe stato meglio che i cambiamenti fossero meno repentini, perché l'acciaieria lì ha chiuso veramente la notte, e la mattina dopo le persone si sono ritrovate senza nulla, e l'impatto di questo tipo di cambiamento nel nord dell'Inghilterra, ma non solo, è un impatto che tuttora si fa sentire.
I mean, bear in mind that Consett Steelworks closed in September 1980. And in 1984, 1985, we had the year-long miners' strike, and yeah, I mean, basically the trades unions were defeated in the year-long miners' strike, and that was, I mean, Thatcher had two huge triumphs. One was the Falklands War, and the other was the defeat of the unions in the miners' strike. And that basically paved the way for basically unfettered capitalism and ununionized labor and lower wages, etc., etc. So British economy became a little bit more competitive on the international scene, and they talk about, you know, even today the Conservative Party talk about an economic miracle under Thatcher, even they acknowledge that huge social damage was done.
Diciamo che Consett, l'acciaieria di Consett era stata chiusa nel 1980 e nel 1984 già avevamo gli scioperi dei minatori, e la Thatcher aveva avuto in questo senso delle due grandi vittorie, chiamiamole così tra virgolette, le Falklands e il fatto di aver sconfitto, se così si può dire, i sindacati e il lavoro sindacale, e di conseguenza anche l'abbassamento degli stipendi. Questo significava prezzi anche più competitivi sul mercato, e i partiti conservatori tuttora chiamano questo un miracolo economico. Comunque l'impatto è stato forte.
Julian, another question. Il libro ha avuto ottimi riscontri di critica ed è stato citato anche in The Photobook History of di Martin Parr e Jerry Badger. Hai mai pensato di ristamparlo? Recentemente hai fatto una tiratura d'autore, quindi con all'interno una stampa, però con una tiratura molto ristretta. E poi volevo sapere come hai gestito l'editing, visto la differenza di immagini d'archivio tra le immagini d'archivio e le tue.
Massimo was asking this. So the book had excellent critical feedback and was mentioned in the photo book, A History by Martin Parr and Jerry Badger.
Was
Have
it?
you?
Is that
Apparently,
so?
he reckons.
Yeah,
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. You can see it.
I know that the In Soccer Wonderland is in the Martin Parr book, but I don't think Steelworks is.
Yeah, I think so.
Anyway.
Because I remember that it was in, and then as I told you, the first time I met the book, it was in Noland at the Northerly Festival.
Okay.
They showed me some books, and finally, I was really shocked by the book because it was really beautiful, and I said, but
I don't know if that's true, because this project and this book are routinely not included in surveys of British photography. I mean, to me, I mean, I in a way, I don't know why that is. I mean, I think for its time, it was an extremely, I mean, I'll be clear, I wasn't trying to be clever when I made this book. I came across Tommy Harris's work, and it opened a door for me. And I realized that by showing Tommy Harris's work, it told a more interesting story than if I just showed Julian Germain's pictures. And then I realized that if I included the snapshots I'd seen, it would tell another layer of the story. And then I realized that I could get some of Don McCullin, you know, and so all I'm trying to do is to tell the story as best I can. But I now realize, all right, I came to realize some years later that this was really new to bring in these different photographic viewpoints into my own work, and so, for example, using archival photographs and archival material is now a completely everyday approach to, you know, it's part of common photographic repertoire to work with archival material now. In the late 1980s and 1990, it wasn't at all. It was something new. I wasn't thinking this is something new, therefore I want to do it. I was just thinking this helps me to tell the story, you know, and it's really interesting because it makes me think about photography, about who takes pictures and why they take pictures, you know. So, you know, I now think retrospectively that it was way ahead of its time, but most people don't know about it.
Diciamo che Julian stava rispondendo a questa cosa di Massimo, che aveva detto che il libro era incluso in questa storia del fotolibro di Martin Parr. dicendo che Julian dice mi sorprende questo perché questo libro non viene mai quasi incluso nelle, diciamo nelle liste di fotografia britannica, eppure adesso se guardo indietro mi rendo conto che era un approccio particolarmente avanti e innovativo per il tempo in cui l'ho fatto. E dice parliamoci chiaramente, io non è che volevo fare lo splendido andando a includere le mie fotografie, quelle di Harris e le istantanee di famiglia. Quello che lui voleva, che stava ricercando non è questo non è stato fatto, quindi adesso farò qualcosa di nuovo, ma cercava di raccontare la storia al meglio, quindi includendo anche punti di vista diversi, che erano appunto il materiale d'archivio e il punto di vista di un altro fotografo, per dare più livelli a questa storia che stava raccontando. E al tempo, tra il 1980 e il 1990, usare materiale d'archivio non era un qualcosa che i fotografi facevano. Adesso chiaramente è diventato proprio quasi di routine, però ecco, insomma, stava semplicemente commentando questo, dice che guardando indietro mi rendo conto che insomma è stato un lavoro particolarmente innovativo per il periodo in cui è stato fatto.
I remember when they showed me the book, the same day I was looking at some books and they showed me John Gossage, the Berlin Wall. And then they show me your books, and I was really surprised by the quality of both the books and the works. But okay, let's go on. And gli album fotografici sono un elemento ricorrente nei tuoi lavori e mi viene in mente un altro autore che ha una sorta di ossessione per gli album, con il quale tu hai lavorato e che abbiamo avuto il piacere di ospitare. Ci puoi parlare della tua collaborazione con Eric Essel in Useful Photography?
Photo albums are a recurring element in your work, and I remember another author who has a sort of obsession with albums with whom you have worked, and we have also had the pleasure of hosting. Can you tell us about your collaboration with Eric Kessels in Useful Photography?
Yes, I mean, I met Eric in maybe the mid-1990s, something like that. He was working in London. He was interested in photography. He called me. We did some work together, and at the time, yeah, I was busy collecting all sorts of things. I'd made a book called In Soccer Wonderland, which included a lot of found photographic material, including Panini football cards and sort of popular football magazines and programs, and I was really enjoying that kind of stuff, and yeah, at that time Eric was working in the commercial field as a art director and copywriter with Johann Kramer, and then they moved back to Holland, and then I was a friend with Hans van der Meer, who's a well-known Dutch photographer, maybe some of you know. There was a football connection between me and Hans van der Meer, and so that's how I was introduced to Hans van der Meer. And then Hans was also interested in sort of vernacular imagery. And so then Hans van der Meer introduced me to Hans Arsman, who was somebody else who was interested. And then basically I introduced them all to Eric, and we started to collaborate on photographic projects. And the idea behind Useful Photography magazine was really to try to avoid using historical material, but to try to use up-to-date photography that is only made for practical purposes and that doesn't have aesthetic considerations beyond the most basic. And so you're sort of like looking at stuff which isn't made for aesthetic reasons at all, but then we were then trying to change the context and to enable people to appreciate images in a different way. And so maybe one of the most successful examples of this was in around 2000 or 2001, we made an edition using photographs from the online auction site eBay. And we collected thousands. I might have some pictures. Let me just have a look, see what I've got. I'll just have useful photography stuff. Useful, what have I got? Yeah, I haven't really got, oh yeah, this is the weddings. This is our, hang on. No, that's not an edition, hang on. Hang on, I might. Well, let's just look at one. So I'll just take you through our process. I always wanted to do an edition about weddings and wedding photography because, of course, wedding photography is often much maligned by us serious photographers. But we all started, ooh, what's this? That's Hunts's stuff. We've got look at all this stuff on weddings that we've got. Mm-hmm. But basically, the idea was to, because we had a 10th issue of Useful Photography, we would make it about wedding photography. And we were able to put everything in kind of chronological order from the wedding venue to them arriving in church to the so this is the just married section. Let's just have a look and see. Oh, hang on. So all these have been searched with the search of just so this isn't the magazine, but it gives you an idea. Maybe I should just open these. And we can just have a look. Oh no, I'll tell you what we'll do, because I've just seen confetti. This is, we've already mentioned confetti once. So this is just a collection of pictures. And so this would just become one section of the magazine. It's just lots of different pictures of confetti, and you realize that the same thing is just a ritual. The same thing happens millions of times. If it's not confetti, it's. And so as a photographer, you kind of, yeah, you go through this ritual, and just in the same way as the people who are getting married go through the ritual. And what's quite nice is when useful photography also tells us something about us as a society. And so even though this is sort of done with some humor and done with a little bit of irony, at the same time, it's kind of true. This is what happens. This, you could argue, I mean, the wedding issue of useful photography, you could argue, is a valuable document about our culture. And so in that particular issue of useful photography, there might be like 2 double-page spreads on confetti, for example, and then afterwards, oh, there's even a section on smoke bubbles. Look at this. Let's have a look at some, oh, there's balloons. Let's have a look at some bubbles. There we go. There's a whole section on bubbles. And then what else have we got? Throwing the bouquet. It's another ritual. So there's always a bouquet in the air. It's a nightmare for the photographer if he misses this.
Maybe you work also on the useful photography about the porno videos with people just meeting.
Yeah, that's one of Eric's. That's more Eric's camp than mine. The ones I personally have really enjoyed are the wedding one. I really liked. We did one on missing persons that I really liked because that was a change. It was a very serious topic. We did one on photography that I liked a lot, even though we slightly broke the rules. So essentially in the one about, there's an issue about photography. We had, if you go through, let me just see. Yeah, if you go through photo manuals, you might see lots of stuff about mistakes. So all of these images here are examples of something wrong. So it becomes a useful photograph because it tells you something wrong. So it's a bad photograph, but it becomes a good photograph in the new context of useful photography.
Mm-hmm.
And so on. And that one was quite nice. But the porno one was good because it was just the opening shot of the porn, you know, because the picture they use to promote the film where they can't actually show actual porn. So the opening image is of, I don't know, somebody delivering a pizza, for example, you know. And so the beginning of the porno film is always different, but then what happens next is always the same, is what you can kind of say.
I'll translate that for them quickly, Julian.
Yeah.
Diciamo che la cosa interessante di Useful Photography era il fatto che era una ricerca fotografica su foto, diciamo, contemporanee, proprio dei giorni nostri, che avevano pochissima considerazione estetica, se non quella prettamente finalizzata al loro uso. Infatti sono tutte fotografie che avevano un determinato scopo, per esempio fotografia di matrimoni che a lui ha divertito molto, foto per esempio di eBay per vendere prodotti che poi venivano ricontestualizzate, anche fotografie di persone scomparse. Quello è un altro argomento che a lui è interessato molto affrontare a livello fotografico. E infine anche c'era una sezione di Useful Photography chiamata fotografia, dove poi c'era questa piccola sottocategoria sugli errori fotografici, che erano delle immagini che abbiamo visto poco fa molto interessanti, ma in quel contesto in particolare finalizzate allo scopo di illustrare un determinato tipo di errore che si doveva evitare di commettere. In ogni caso, tutta questa, chiamiamola così, ricerca fatta sia con ironia che e spesso anche con sì, diciamo una certa dose di sarcasmo e ironia, in realtà ha anche delle considerazioni profonde di base, perché sono delle immagini che dicono un qualcosa sulla nostra cultura, che sono un documento di valore su una determinata società che è la nostra. Nel caso dei matrimoni, ad esempio, vedevamo certi rituali ricorrenti sia per il fotografo stesso che per le persone. Insomma, era una considerazione su un livello poi anche più ampio.
Oh, look, these are from the porn series here, I think.
Queste sono immagini dalla serie sui porno, curata credo in particolare da Eric Kessels.
So it's a birthday party, somebody who's working as a cleaner, and I can't see what's going on up there.
Sì,
But I mean,
l'importanza del fatto che in questo lavoro sul porno tutti sanno come va a finire il film, però fondamentalmente l'approccio tra le persone varia a seconda della storia che viene creata, quindi era questo l'aspetto interessante e anche comico del progetto. Julian, let's talk about another project. In No Oio da Rua, in the street of the street, in the eye of the street, hai dato delle macchine fotografiche a ragazzi che vivono nelle favelas di Belo Horizonte in Brasile. Ne sono venute fuori delle immagini bellissime, intense e vere. Che tipo di esperienza è stata per te? Come ti sei rapportato alle loro immagini? Quanto è durato il progetto e come si è evoluto? E ti domando anche se rimarrà un'esperienza unica o hai intenzione di portarla anche in altre città. E se puoi mostrare anche delle immagini.
In No Olho da Rua, you gave cameras to young boys and girls who live in the favelas of Belo Horizonte. So beautiful, intense and true images came out of it. And what kind of experience was this for you? How did you relate to their images actually? And how long did the project last and how did it evolve? Will it remain a single, remain like one single experience, or will you take it elsewhere? And if you could also maybe show some pictures of the work.
Yes, I will. If I can just get my head around it. 1 second. Okay, I have a PDF here. I think I'll just open that. So I mean, this is a long-term project. It started back in the 1990s and continued sporadically. And essentially, it was a case of me and two Brazilian colleagues, Patricia Azevedo and Murilo Godoy, giving cameras to people living rough on the streets of Belo Horizonte in Brazil. At the time, for me, this came out of a commission to make work about soccer in Brazil. And there were places that I wanted to make work, but it was dangerous, very dangerous. And so I just had this initially casual idea to, because they told me that it was dangerous for me to go to where they lived to make pictures. And so I had this casual idea initially. I wonder if I give them cameras, can they make pictures? And it developed into this project with street kids. And we've worked, me and Patricia and Murillo have worked intermittently since 1995. And much less so in the last decade, but we are still in touch with some of the same people. And now we have a big archive, and we have embarked on a project to make edits from the archive to make small books, almost like zines. And we were unfortunate that this project to make these zines perfectly blended with COVID. We literally launched the first 2 zines the week before COVID lockdown. And since then, my colleagues in Brazil have not really been able to participate because of their own health problems, and the situation in Brazil has made it very difficult. Nevertheless, we managed to make 5 zines. And so essentially what we do is we have this huge archive. I'll just show you some of the archive quickly on my desktop, just so you see. If you go to the beautiful Horizon archive, we have contact prints from 95, 97. So there's just thousands of contact prints in here, or hundreds of contact prints, I should say, from 2010, and then more from there. And so it goes. So we go through the archive, and we start to see, a bit like with the useful photography wedding thing, you start to see things that repeat as themes in the archive. And so just to go back to where one thing that we saw in the archive was that there are quite a lot of pictures of street people sleeping. And so I wonder if I can show this full screen. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah. So this is Nawali Drew in the Eye Street, archive number 4, asleep. And as I said, it had been the intention that we would be in touch with the participants in this project during this process, but it hasn't happened. So it's a shit situation, really. But in any case, bear in mind that the pictures you're looking at here have been made by people with no photographic training. And they have chosen to photograph anything they want. And I don't know, because of the generosity of photography, because they live extraordinary lives and see extraordinary things, because they are curious, they tend to just point the camera at something that they're interested in. But they capture these amazing moments.
Questo progetto è un progetto che si basa appunto sull'idea di dare delle macchine fotografiche alle persone delle favelas di Belo Horizonte, ragazzi di strada, che possono decidere di fotografare qualsiasi cosa vogliono. Bisogna tenere a mente che queste persone non hanno assolutamente alcuna nozione di fotografia, ma sarà per la generosità stessa del mezzo, sarà perché sono persone molto curiose o comunque che vivono situazioni in qualche modo straordinarie. Le immagini che ne escono fuori sono davvero intense e interessanti, e il lavoro ormai è diventato un lavoro in qualche modo di studio d'archivio, riprendere tutte queste immagini scattate negli anni e cercare ormai di farne dei libri fotografici piccolini oppure delle zine. L'idea alla base era comunque di rimanere in contatto con queste persone, però a causa del Covid in particolare ciò non è stato, al momento non è possibile, e comunque lui e i suoi collaboratrici ripercorrono queste immagini e cercano di metterle insieme comunque con un'idea di fondo in comune o coerente, in modo diverso chiaramente da quello che veniva fatto per Useful Photography, però anche qui per esempio è stato fatto un piccolo volume sulle persone addormentate, perché tanti ragazzi e tante ragazze avevano scattato amici o insomma conoscenti eccetera, persone che dormivano, e quindi hanno rimesso insieme dando vita a questo documento di società.
And yeah, I mean, so some of the pictures are astonishing pictures in their own right, and others become more usable and more interesting in the context of other pictures of sleep.
Infatti la cosa proprio interessante è che alcune immagini, cioè se da sole in qualche modo fini a se stesse, però diventano ancora più interessanti se messe insieme ad altre immagini che hanno comunque a che fare col contesto del dormire.
And just and sometimes you will find there will be a picture that I made, or one of Patricia or Murillo made. But so far in this series, I just saw two that were not made by the project participants themselves. We don't distinguish between our pictures and their pictures. We very often don't know who the author of a photograph is, because quite often we know who is responsible for a camera, but quite often the person in the picture is the person responsible for the camera. So so you don't know who actually pressed the shutter, because it wasn't the person who was responsible. And they don't think of authorship. It's a very interesting thing to them. Authorship is about who's in the picture rather than who pressed the button.
That's really interesting. Ha detto una cosa molto interessante, ha detto che la maggior parte delle volte non sanno chi ha scattato la fotografia, sanno solo chi è responsabile in qualche modo della macchina fotografica, e il fatto è che poi spesso il responsabile della macchina fotografica compare nelle fotografie, quindi non si sa chi ha scattato le immagini. Ed è molto interessante il fatto che per loro, per queste persone, il concetto di autorialità non è tanto nello scattare l'immagine, ma nell'apparire nella fotografia stessa.
Yeah, so that's an edition on sleep. Would you like to see another one? There is another edition.
C'hai l'audio.
Can you show us a zine? I remember you published a zine.
Yeah, that was
more than one, but I remember especially
yeah.
one.
The sleep was a PDF of a zine.
I remember pictures of a small
of the actual zine. Yes, hang on.
a child with I don't know, a gun in the bed or something.
Yeah. That was in one of the zines. Hang on, let me just dig it out. Desktop Morel. I should have. Many book pages. So that might be, that's the portrait. Might be in this one. No, or is it? Hang on. Yeah, it's in this one. I don't know why preview refuses to, but anyway, here's some, this is from an edition that Martin Parr edited. They're just some pages, it's not necessarily in, and it's sometimes, I mean, this is a fantastic picture of a guy called Walter. It's just, when we first met them, this was back in 1995, 1996, and they were young, they were fit, they were energetic, and of course now when we meet them, they are, you know, they're sort of 15, 20 years younger than me, but they look a lot older than me now. This boy is now dead. He died in some kind of road accident.
Questa immagine a lui piace molto, è un ragazzo di nome Walter, al tempo, no, erano energici, pieni di vita, e poi li rivedi 15, cioè anni dopo, e nonostante abbiano 15 o 20 anni in meno di Julian sembrano molto più grandi, e adesso questo ragazzo è morto in una specie di incidente stradale. E questa edizione che stiamo vedendo è un'edizione con un editing fatto da Martin Parr.
And so this was just a very simple process whereby I mean, Martin looked through the pictures. These are all from 1995. Martin looked through the 1995 archive. He got through about a quarter of it and said, well, I've got more than enough pictures here. It's typical of Martin. He did his edit in about an hour.
What, it took him like an hour to do it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Because he found, you know, because he went through the folders from 1995 and he just said, select that, click, 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 select that, click, 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 select that. And then we had about 50 pictures after an hour. And he said, well, that's got to be, because we only had room for 25 pictures or something. And so he said, well, that's more than enough.
E praticamente Martin Parr ha fatto questo editing dalle immagini tutte del 1995, e ha detto Julian che ha fatto un editing in un'ora, perché già in un'ora aveva immagini più che sufficienti per fare il suo editing, e l'aveva già visto, insomma. Aveva in un'ora aveva selezionato, non so, circa 50 immagini, sapendo che ne dovevano inserire 20-25, aveva detto ok, già ne ho abbastanza per lavorarci sopra.
And yes, and so in this series of zines, there are planned to be 18 zines eventually, but as I say, the situation is very complicated in Brazil at the moment, partly because my colleague Patricia has health problems. Her brother has even worse health problems. He's just had a kidney transplant, and it's a difficult time there with COVID and everything as well. But for example, the idea is that this particular picture of the baby, there will be an issue called babies, because there are many, many baby pictures in the archive. And so we are not averse to a picture appearing twice in the series, you know. And so you can kind of make new sets. And we had, and 5 is a fantastic story. So there is, let's just selected spreads. I must have, I'll just show you the PDF of the 5th one. Mini books 5.
Dan diceva che ci sono, diciamo, erano previste circa 18 zine, solo che chiaramente con le complicazioni del Covid e complicazioni a livello personale dei colleghi in Brasile è particolarmente difficile. In ogni caso si pensava anche a un'edizione su i neonati, perché tante immagini avevano questo tema in comune. E qua invece sta facendo vedere un'altra storia molto, molto bella.
So this is a picture of Rosemary taking a picture of a guy driving his car. And Rosemary was a girl that we met in 2005. And she was around for a couple of years. And then she went away. We don't know where. But Rosemary made fantastic pictures. And she made fantastic portraits. And she also was the only person who participated in the project who seemed to make kind of projects herself. You know, she did a series of pictures of people in cars, and she also did a whole series of portraits of people on the street. And I think the motivation for it might have been a money spinning plan, because I think the idea was, when she made these pictures of people in cars, that because she waited around at the traffic lights, she would make pictures of people, and then because people are on their routine commute, she would see them again a couple of days later, and she'd have a print, and she'd be able to sell them the print for like $1 or something. Do you know what I mean? So I think she was being smart, but she made fantastic pictures. And my colleague Mastrorillo, Patricia's partner Mastrorillo, saw her taking this picture, and so he made this picture that's on the cover. But it works beautifully, and because then this is the picture that Rosemary was taking. So there is Rosemary making the picture. Here is the picture that she made when you open the magazine. And you really get a sort of sense of how people respond to street people approaching them.
La storia di Rosemary in particolare è molto interessante, perché sembrava essere l'unica persona che aveva cominciato a fare dei progetti lei stessa. In questo caso in particolare può essere che, anzi loro diciamo hanno forse capito che lei faceva le foto a tutte queste persone in macchina, perché sapendo di rincontrarle poi in tempi successivi, magari pensava di vendere la fotografia stessa a queste persone qui che in attesa al semaforo, lei scattava e quindi c'è tutta questa bellissima raccolta di fotografie. La copertina è l'immagine scattata dal collega di Julian, che l'aveva vista e quindi ha fatto la foto a lei, e la zin si apre con l'immagine che lei stava effettivamente scattando in quel momento, e quindi è una bella narrazione, un bel documento di come anche le persone reagiscono al venire scattati ai semafori e a questo contesto.
And there's so much going on here, because obviously this is a world that they are excluded from.
E questo è davvero molto interessante, perché è un mondo dal quale loro vengono esclusi.
Okay, thanks a lot, Julian. It's a bit late. I think we have to close. As always, you are so generous and so interesting. So we could continue until tomorrow, but
Yeah.
we have to quit.
Okay, well, let me just say that interestingly, Steelworks exists again because I found the designers of Steelworks, and you saw how well, I mean, Steelworks is an interestingly designed book, you know, but it kind of all disappeared. But the people who designed it, they closed their company a couple of years ago, and when they did, they found about 5 boxes of Steelworks. So I have copies of it again.
Wow.
So if anybody's interested, just send me an email. And there is also a special edition with prints, which I did, which if anybody's interested in having a slip-cased edition of Steelworks, that's also a new thing. I still haven't done my website, but it's coming.
Okay. C'è qualcuno che vuole fare domande prima di chiudere? No, mi sembra di no almeno. Okay,
Okay.
I just asked the people if they had to put some question, but probably you told so much and it's enough.
Okay.
Diceva se siete interessati a comprare una copia di Steelworks, basta che gli mandate un'email, perché anche se era sold out, i designer che avevano lavorato al libro insomma ha chiuso il loro studio e hanno ritrovato due scatole di Steelworks, quindi se siete interessati ci sono delle copie miracolosamente.
Sì, tratto credo che sia un'edizione speciale con una stampa dentro, no? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for everything as usual, and stay in touch as usual. Okay.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Take care, everybody.
Take care, Julian.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for the translation.
No problem.
That's great. Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Grazie.
Bye.
Ciao Enzo.
Ciao, Francesco.